The wind was the only sound out on the flatlands, carrying the sting of alkali dust and a deeper scent of despair. Somewhere, far from anything she knew, a young woman named Aara sat in a buckboard, her hands loosely tied, her face hidden by a worn-out shawl. She was being taken away, sold off, like livestock. Her own family, just behind her, kept their eyes on the horizon. They couldn't look at her. She'd been branded infertile, a curse, useless for the one thing that defined a woman's worth. Having sons, they called her barren. No man would ever have her. And in a world that measured a woman by her womb, Aara had become worthless. The doctor's words had been a hammer blow. "She'll never carry a child," he'd said. The light in her parents' eyes had gone out, and soon after they made a deal. A rancher, deep in the Western Territories. He'd offered a few gold coins, just enough to keep their failing farm from foreclosure. And so, she was traded. As the wagon rattled into the deep wilderness, she just stared at the passing sky. The tears had already dried. She wasn't even angry, just empty. At least she thought, the sky can't put a rope on me. By dark, they arrived. The ranch was just miles of fencing disappearing into the black. Horses shifted in their stalls. The only sound was a single hammer hitting wood, steady, solid. And then she saw him. The rancher, tall, with shoulders that looked like they could carry the world. He looked like he'd been hammered out of rock and teak. His name was Cole Hartman. Cole looked up as the wagon creaked to a halt. His blue eyes went hard when he saw the girl climb down, her hands still bound. He slowly wiped his palms on his denims and walked over. "Is this the one?" he asked. His voice was quiet, but it had an edge. The trader just grunted, pushing a paper at him. "She's the one. Family says she's faulty." Cole's jaw went tight. "You know the deal." He looked at the trader, his voice dropping. "Faulty?" Quote. The trader spat. "Can't have children. They said she's no good for starting a family, but she can cook, clean, whatever you need." Cole looked at Aara. Her head was down, her hair hiding her face, and something inside him shifted. It wasn't pity, it was a low, simmering anger at the whole rotten business. Without a word, he stepped forward and untied the rope from her wrists. "You can move about," he said, his voice flat. "You ain't a prisoner here." Aara's head snapped up, her eyes wide with confusion. "But you bought me." Cole's gaze softened just a fraction, but his voice stayed firm. "I bought your passage out of that situation, not your obedience. You can stay, or you can go. It's your choice." The trader let out a laugh, spat in the dust again, and rode off, vanishing into the cold night. For a long, long time, nobody spoke. The only sound was the wind and the distant nicker of a horse. Finally, Cole spoke, his voice quieter now. "You look half-starved. There's stew on the stove. Eat what you need. Get some rest. We can talk when the sun's up." Inside the cabin, it smelled like pine and wood smoke. A single lamp cast a warm, flickering light. Aara sat by the table, her hands shaking. It had been days since she'd had a real meal. She looked around. Simple, strong furniture, everything built by hand and built to last. On the mantel, a small, faded picture. A woman, smiling, holding a baby. Cole's late wife, she figured. Cole slid a bowl of hot stew in front of her, then sat on the other side of the table. "I'm not the man they told you I was. Aara," he started. "I didn't buy you for that. I just wanted to give you a place to start over. Out here," he motioned to the dark, "we don't much care what a person was, only what they are." Aara stared at him, new tears blurring her vision. You don't even know me." He nodded, slow. "Then tell me who you are." She had to swallow twice. I was a daughter, then I was a burden. Now, I don't know what I am." Cole leaned back, his eyes unreadable in the lamplight. "Well, you're not a burden here. You work if you feel like it. You rest if you need to. This land, It's good at teaching folks how to live again. Maybe it can teach you." For the first time she couldn't even remember. Aara felt a warmth that wasn't from the fire. It was kindness, a thing she thought had died. That night, in the small, clean room he gave her, she cried, but not from sadness. She cried because, for the first time, someone had looked at her and seen a human being. Not just a broken piece of property. The days started to pass. The sun came up hard and bright over the ranch, turning the fields to gold. Cole worked from first light to last, mending fences, breaking horses, and sometimes without making a show of it. He'd teach Aara the quiet rhythm of the land. He never yelled, he never ordered, and piece by piece, she started to mend. One morning she was up before him, an itch in her hands to do something. She fed the horses, learned how to throw a saddle, and helped move a small herd. Her laugh, when it finally came, was soft and shaky, like a bird testing its wings after a long winter. Cole saw it. He didn't say anything. He just smiled, a small quirk of his lips when she walked by. And his own heart felt a little less heavy. Then, one evening, as the sky bled out into orange and purple, Aara finally asked the question, "Why did you really buy me, Cole?" Quote, he stopped his work, wiping his hands on a rag. "Because I saw how they looked at you, like you were less than a stray dog, and I couldn't let that stand." Her voice was barely a whisper. "You don't believe what they said about me?" Quote. He met her gaze, his eyes steady and clear. "I believe that no one else gets to decide what you're worth. Not your family, not some doctor, and not me. Only you get to decide that." Those words, they hit her harder than any physical blow, and for the first time she thought, maybe, just maybe, her life wasn't over. As the days blurred into weeks, the ranch felt alive. Flowers started to push up through the dust. Laughter wasn't a strange sound anymore. And deep in Aara's chest, something new was growing. Hope. One night, a terrible storm rolled in. Lightning split the sky, and the thunder sounded like the mountains were falling. The roof sprung a leak, and the horses, they went wild with panic. Aara and Cole ran to the stables, the rain hitting them like needles. They moved together, side by side, soaking wet, calming the terrified animals. When the worst of it was over, she turned to him, her eyes shining in the lantern light. You saved me," she whispered. He just shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. "No, you saved yourself." And right there, with the storm roaring outside and the smell of wet hay all around them, something passed between them, something real and stronger than any words. As the storm quieted, Aara looked out over the land. It had felt like a prison when she arrived. Now, it felt like home. She said a small, silent thank you for her freedom, for the kindness, and for the man who saw her value when everyone else had thrown her away. Far off, in the clearing sky, the morning star began to shine. The sun climbed over the ranch, and it felt like a new promise. The air was clean, washed by the storm, and it smelled like a fresh start. Aara stood at the fence line, her hands on the weathered wood. She watched the horses run, their manes flying in the mist. Her life had changed. It was a life she couldn't have even dreamed of. The woman who'd been sold as broken now stood straight and tall. And her laughter, it was part of the ranch's sound now, right along with the wind. Cole was nearby, fixing a post. The morning sun was warm on his back. He looked over and saw her smiling, not a small, shaky smile, a real one, full of peace. "You look happier," he said, that small grin of his appearing. "I am," she said, turning to him. "For the first time, I feel like I'm somewhere, like I belong." They fell into a rhythm. They ate their meals together. They shared stories by the fire, small stories, but they were theirs. They found a deep comfort in the simple things. The creak of the porch chair, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of the rain on the roof. They never said the word love. They didn't have to. It was just there. It was in the way he'd watch her, in the way she'd wait for him. It was growing, quiet and strong, in all the spaces between the words. But then, one morning, a wave of dizziness hit her. She grabbed the porch rail, brushing it off. Just tired from the chores, she thought. Days later, though, the weakness was worse. Cole saw it. He saw how pale she'd gotten, how her hands shook just a little. "You're not well," he said. It wasn't a question. "We're riding to town." "No, I'm fine. She started to protest, but he wasn't listening. He just gently lifted her up into the wagon and turned the team toward the very same clinic where, months ago, her whole life had been written off. The doctor, older, grayer, looked at her over his spectacles. He examined her, his face a mask of confusion, which slowly turned into complete disbelief. Finally, he took his glasses off. He looked at Cole, then at Aara. "Well, Mr. Hartman," he cleared his throat, "she's pregnant." The words just hung in the tiny room. Aara's hand flew to her mouth. Her heart hammered against her ribs. That's not possible. You said, quote." The doctor looked down at his hands. "I was wrong, plain and simple. It seems nature didn't get my message." Tears streamed down Aara's face, but she didn't know why. Her hands hovered over her heart. Cole reached out, his big, rough hand covering hers. His voice was low and steady. "It's a miracle, Aara. See, you were never broken at all." On the long ride home, she just sat, holding his hand. The plains rolled out forever, golden and green under the wide open sky. "I don't understand it," she whispered. Cole squeezed her hand. "Good things don't always need understanding, Aara. Sometimes you just gotta let 'em happen." When they got back to the ranch, it looked different, brighter, like the whole world was celebrating with them. The wind smelled like wildflowers, and for the first time, Aara truly, fully laughed. Every step she took on that land felt like she was crushing the lies that had tried to define her. The months passed in a blur of quiet, happy work. Cole built a cradle, by hand, sanding every piece of wood until it was smooth as water. Aara sat by the fire, sewing tiny clothes, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You gave me my life back," she told him one night. Cole looked up from his work, his eyes so gentle. "No, Aara, you just needed someone to remind you. It was always yours." When the day finally came, the ranch went quiet, held its breath under a silver dawn. There was pain and fear and so much hope. And then, hours later, the first thin cry of a new baby echoed through the cabin. It was a sound that broke them both. Cole held the tiny child, his big, calloused hands shaking. She's perfect," he whispered. Aara smiled, exhausted, her face shining with tears. Cole laughed, a soft, broken sound. "Do you believe me now?" Quote, "I always did," she whispered back. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing the dust from the air. Cole walked to the window, holding his daughter, and whispered, "The world called you barren, Aara, but heaven, it seems, just wasn't listening." And as the sun finally broke through the clouds, light poured into the room, warm and golden and new. Aara reached for her baby, her heart complete. She had been sold as worthless, but she had found a love that proved she was priceless. Sometimes, the world will try to tell you what you are. It will try to label you as less, but love and faith and simple, decent kindness have the power to rewrite any story. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories of love, faith, and second chances.